Big changes are about to happen in Gaza. We saw the march of millions of people from south to north of Gaza. The media was celebrating this as a symbol of the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. But ladies and gentlemen, this is far from being over. An earthquake of geopolitical changes is coming, and it will affect not only Israel, but also the entire world. President Trump shocked the world when he said he made a phone call to the president of Egypt and the king of Jordan and told them they should take in the refugees from Gaza. Of course, this would be a giant operation involving the movement of almost 2 million people. That's a lot of people that live on this very, very small territory we call Gaza. But before you will tell me this is a crazy idea, it will never happen, nobody will allow it, well, let me tell you that there is a real push for this kind of solution. And it wouldn't be even the first time it happens that such a large group of people are moved. It did happen in the past. And if you think that this is very unjust, this is not good, this is a bad idea, let me tell you something about refugees. You see, if we think about refugees in the context of the Near East, we always are bombarded by this Palestinians, Palestinian problem, Palestinian suffering, all of this. But people often forget about the Jewish refugees from Arab countries. That's right, there were thousands of Jewish refugees that were kicked out of the Arab countries. Let me give you a summary of what happened, because it's fascinating that people don't know this history that is very important. So I will provide you with a statistic showing you how many Jewish people lived in Muslim countries before the creation of Israel and how many live today. And the numbers are shocking. So here we have Morocco, where 250,000 Jewish people lived in this country before 1948. Today, this number is reduced to only 2,000 Jewish people. But let's move on. Algeria, 140,000 before 48, and now no more than 50 Jewish people. Next, we have Tunisia, 105,000 and now 1,500. Libya, 38,000 and now zero Jewish people. Egypt, 75,000. Now 20 people. But it's not over. Let's move on. Yemen, 55,000. No more than 50 people today. Oman, 5,000. Today, 0 Jewish people. Pakistan, 2,000 people. Now, 0. Pakistan's neighbor, Afghanistan, 5,000 people. Now, 0 Jewish people. And now the big one, we have Iran, 150,000 people, and now only 10 Jewish people live in this big country. Iraq, again, 150,000, and now about 7 Jewish people live in Iraq. Syria, 40,000 before 48, and now 0 Jewish people in Syria. And finally, Lebanon, 20,000, and today less than 100 Jewish people live in Lebanon. So to summarize, in all of those Muslim countries, there were about 1 million Jewish people living before 48. Today, there is less than 5,000 Jewish people living in this entire territory of those vast, big countries. It's shocking. And we'll talk what happened to those refugees. But first, one more statistic on Gaza. Gaza population in 48 is 80,000 people. That's right, 80,000 people. Today, it is estimated that 2.2 million people live in Gaza today. So, just looking at those statistics, you could think to yourself, something ain't right here. This is not what we are told. This is not the narrative I am hearing. And look, those are statistics. I can't lie about it. You can find it on the internet. This is the truth. Now, very often when the media describe Gaza, a certain word is used quite often: genocide. How can there be a genocide if we look at this statistic? I mean, if Israel is committing crime, they're not doing it very well, are they? And in fact, if we compare it to what happened to the Jewish people in Muslim countries, this is the real extermination. Okay, but you might have heard this notion, very often propagated by the Arabs, that before the creation of Israel, in the Near East, the Jews, the Arabs, they all lived in harmony. Well, this is also a gross lie that we will expose right now. So let's look at some of the countries I mentioned before. So here we have Yemen, 55,000 before 48 and now less than 50 people. The Jewish community in Yemen used to be ancient and with rich traditions. Some even say that their relationship with this part of the world started when Queen Sheba, who some believe came from those territories, visited the kingdom that was created during Solomon's reign. Here you can see some historical pictures of the Jewish community in Yemen. Those pictures were taken at the beginning of the 20th century. And what you see is a beautiful community, but a community that is living in horrible conditions. They are living in ghettos, and they are very, very poor. So to understand what happened to this community, we need to realize that the Jewish community in the Near East, in the Middle East, in Africa, found themselves in a very difficult spot when Islam became the majority religion in this part of the world. And Islam, as we know, well, it did not spread in a peaceful way, but it spread by conquest, by sword. And everybody who was opposing it was basically slain. That was the story of the expansion of Islam. And suddenly, all those Jewish communities that were spread out in the Middle East, they found themselves under a religion that wasn't very tolerant. Everybody who's not Muslim suddenly is an infidel. They are second-class citizens and they are persecuted. That was the reality in Muslim-ruled countries. And what regulated this relationship between Jews and Muslims was the so-called Charter of Omar. Omar or Umar was the second caliph after Muhammad, and he created this charter, this set of rules that regulated the relationship between Arabs and Jews. And the people that were not Arabs were called dhimmis. Now we will quickly look at those rules because I think it's very important and it shows what Arabs think of Jews today. And it's based on those rules, those sets of beliefs. So, rule number 1. Dhimmis were not allowed to build new churches, synagogues or monasteries. So, no new places of worship. Dhimmis could repair the old buildings of worship, but they were not allowed to expose on them any signs of their religion. So no Star of David, no crosses, nothing like that. There were certain dress codes also introduced. And what is interesting here is that for the Jews specifically, a badge was often used in many of the Muslim countries, and the badge was yellow. So everybody had to wear a certain badge that would tell everybody that he is a Jew. Now, this is something that comes up much later in history and is also used by the Nazi Germany. But it's interesting that it actually originates over here, so very, very early on, and it's introduced with the Muslim religion. The dhimmis were also not allowed very often to live in the same places as the Muslims. So special zones, special neighborhoods were designated for non-Arabs to live. So again, this is another example of what we've seen in history, so the creation of the ghettos. Again, you could trace the beginnings of it to Islam. And when Hitler came to power, the Mufti of Jerusalem, High Amin al-Husseini, actually met with Hitler and told him, don't expel the Jews, because if you will, they will come to the Holy Land. So just get rid of them, eliminate. And he was actually involved in also exterminating many Jews in what was then called Palestine. And if we examine the Charter of Omar, we understand where this disregard for Jews comes from. There are also many humiliating rules that we will discuss now. So, for example, the Jews had to give up seats when a Muslim would enter, or they could not speak loudly when a Muslim was near him, things like that. Dhimmis were also not allowed to ride horses and camels, and in some cases, very often, they were not even allowed to ride donkeys and mules. So basically, if we transfer it to today's reality, nobody that would not be Arab couldn't drive a car. That was the main sort of transport in the days, and if you were not Muslim, you couldn't drive. If you're not Muslim, you can't also have any weapons. So again, this is helping against revolts and things like that. Well, if you're not allowed to have weapons and everybody around you have weapons, well, you're not in a good spot. Dhimmis also couldn't have public religious processions, and this is a big one for the Jews because a lot of the holidays, you know, even like weddings, funerals, bar mitzvahs, holidays like Simchat Torah and others, they're very, very expressive and joyful, and you could not do this in public. If somebody from your community died, you were also not allowed to grieve for that person in a visible way. And that's a big one again for the Jewish people, where mourning, where grief is a very important process. There were also certain trades, works that were restricted from the Jews. There was also a special tax, the Gaza tax, on the people that were not Muslim. So basically they said that this is for protection, but it's like mafia saying to you, you know, if you want to be protected, well, you gotta pay us, otherwise you'll be in trouble. And the final one, Jews, Christians could not build buildings higher than the ones of the Muslims in a neighborhood, in a city. So if a Muslim tells you that the Jews and Arabs lived in peace before the creation of Israel, well, it's a lie. The Jews were persecuted, they were treated like slaves, and very often there were massacres, there were pogroms, synagogues were burned, children were taken from their parents if they did not convert to Muslim religion, to Islam. So it was not a good coexistence. But let's go back to the Jews of Yemen as an example, showing us what happened to a lot of the Jews in Arab Muslim countries. So when Israel announced its independence, the situation of Jews in Yemen got even more dire. They were persecuted like never before. But they couldn't just leave Yemen, nobody would allow them. So they actually had to travel to a spot called Aden, which was a British-run colony in Yemen. Now, for many of them, this was a very dangerous road for hundreds of miles, kilometers through the desert, through the mountains, but they were very determined and they made it. They made it to Aden. A lot of them made it to Aden after this exhausting and long road, but they had hope. And Israel was also preparing to transport those Jewish people from Aden back to Israel, to their homeland. Barefoot, with little possessions, some that were lucky were on donkeys. They came to Aden because they heard there is hope. Their salvation came in a form that they have never imagined. A plane, a machine, something modern that would transport them from this medieval age of no technology to a new country where they would be treated fairly. Imagine, what are the hopes? What are the feelings? How are they waiting for so many years, for so many centuries, being faithful to their God and understanding that He has not forgotten them. But they remember the ancient words of the Bible. Tell the people of Israel how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to me. The wings of eagles, that was the name of the operation that Israel gave to the rescue of Yemen Jews. In the following years, several of such operations were carried out to get out almost all the Jews of Yemen to Israel. And of course, it wasn't just a simple move. It was a fight for life. If they would stay in Yemen, they would be exterminated. And even after so many years, the Muslim people in Yemen are still threatening the Jews, which we saw in recent conflict between Israel and Hamas. Rockets were shot from Yemen thousands of kilometers towards Israel. Big rockets. Now, it is very important also to see the rest of the story and see how the refugees, not only from Yemen, were treated in Israel. When the Jewish people returned from all over the world to the Promised Land, they were not treated as a burden, as a problem for the country. They were treated with great joy, with a celebration. Everybody was happy, not only those that returned, but also those that waited for them all this time. And although Israel was their dream, it certainly wasn't the Garden of Eden. Hundreds of years of Turkish rule left the land barren with no trees and many rocks that had to be removed. But the Jewish people were happy to begin cultivating the land, to work on it, to work hard on it, because they knew that this is their land, and here they finally can feel safe. And while Jewish people were returning from Arab countries where they were thrown out, where they were persecuted, they were given the opportunity to take their lives in their own hands and determine their future. And what about Arab refugees that left to other Arab countries like Egypt, like Jordan, like Syria? Well, they were left in camps, often surrounded by a wire fence, and they were treated as animals. That was the difference. And while the life of newcomers to Israel, the Jewish newcomers, was not easy, you had to work hard, you were given an opportunity, hope of better life. There was a plan of taking in so many refugees. As we said, almost 1 million. And you know, this is as much as the Arab refugees that escaped to Jordan, to Syria, to Lebanon, to Egypt. A million Jewish refugees from Arab countries and a million Arab refugees that were created when Israel was created. The difference? The Arab refugees still live like this, in camps, segregated from the rest of the population, somewhere in the desert, away from civilization, and constantly given money, more money and more money and more money, but with no opportunity to work, to develop themselves. I mean, even water has to be brought to these places. There is no future. They are just frozen in time, and everybody is keeping them like this in those horrible conditions. And many of them are used to it. They can't imagine another life because they have been receiving foreign funds for so long. They are so dependent on it, and they are used to it. Now, from that 1 million Arab refugees we had in 48, now there is almost 5 million refugees living in those camps. And it's not gonna get better. The UNRWA is only making it worse by giving the people money, food. They are totally dependent, and they do not think about being creative, about working, about trying to find a way. And this is why President Trump said that's enough. I mean, why should American taxpayers pay for this? There is no plan for those refugees. There is no future. It's just gonna get worse and worse. So it's better to cut it off now and make the people find solutions themselves. Make them be creative. Of course, this will have to happen if we are going to solve this problem, and it has to create a need in those countries they are in, those refugees like Jordan, like Syria, like Lebanon, to give those people also opportunity to get out of those camps. Now, Gaza is a major problem in all of this situation. As you can see, the population of Gaza has skyrocketed since 1947. Now it's over 2 million people living on this very small piece of land. So the people have multiplied like crazy in Gaza. And despite of billions, I'm speaking billions of dollars given to Gaza, it still looks like a slum. And it is where the terrorists just pop up like mushrooms. And it seems that President Trump and his administration understands this, that something different needs to be done if we are to solve this unsolvable situation. Something radical needs to happen.
I said to him, I'd love you to take on more, because I'm looking at the whole Gaza Strip right now, and it's a mess. It's a real mess.
So you'd like Jordan to house people from Gaza?
To take people. I'd like Egypt to take people. I'm talking to General El-Sisi tomorrow, sometime, I believe. And I'd like Egypt to take people, and I'd like Jordan to take people. You're talking about probably 1.5 million people, and we just clean out that whole thing. It's it's over the centuries that's many, many conflicts that site. And I don't know, it's something has to happen, but it's literally a demolition site right now. Almost everything's demolished.
Now, for the current moment, both Egypt and Jordan have refused this idea, said this is not gonna happen. Now, Egypt is so afraid of this idea that they have put a lot of their military equipment on the Sinai desert, which is against the Camp David agreement of demilitarizing Sinai. And on one side, I can understand Egypt. They don't want, so many terrorists in their country. I mean, Gaza is full of terrorists right now. So it's understandable that they are afraid to take them in. But on the other hand, it's their fault. They are responsible for this situation by years of neglecting the problem of refugees, of not allowing them to live normally among Arabs. They created this monster specifically to threaten Israel. Now, we know that this week Netanyahu went to Washington. He was one of the first foreign guests in the White House. And be assured that this topic was discussed, that something needs to happen in Gaza so that there can be a future. And if you think to yourself, nah, this is not gonna happen, it's too many people, it's impossible to do. Well, it's a lot of people, that's true, but it has been done in history many, many times when you had so large populations moving. Let me give you an example from a similar time period, so 1947. This is the time that India was divided into India and Pakistan after they gained its independence from the British Empire. So suddenly you have two countries created. In India, of course, the majority of population is Hindu, and in Pakistan, Muslim. So those that found themselves in India and were Muslim very often chose to go to Pakistan, and those that were in Pakistan and they were Hindu, they moved to India. Of course, it's much more complex than that, but I'm just giving you something in a snapshot. Anyway, it is estimated that 10 to 15 million people emigrated during this time period. So it is possible to do, and even on a much bigger scale. It's just the willingness to do it. And that's the big problem, because Arab countries are not willing to find a solution for this, what is happening in Gaza. And perhaps maybe this is the best solution, to separate the Jews from the Arabs. Because the Arabs, in their nature, they have a disregard for Jewish people, which we saw in the charter of Omar. And if you're saying, well, it's unjust, why the Palestinians, Arabs, whatever you call them, should leave, why? It's their land. Well, the Jews also left in the Arab countries. They also had houses. They also had something that they had to leave. So it's not like the injustice is only happening to the Arabs. And the Jews would like to live in peace with Arabs. But it takes two sides. If you have a disregard for the Jewish people, if you treat them like a second class, and you think they are an evil coming from the devil, well, it's difficult to talk to a person like that. And you know, Israel gave a good example for the Arabs. There are Arabs living in the country of Israel, having an Israeli citizenship. This is showing you the city of Akko, where there is a lot of Arabs living, and they are living side by side with the Jewish people. So it is possible, but only when the ruling side is saying that they are equal. They should be treated the same. The Arabs have work, they have opportunities, they can go to school. It's their choice how they will live their life. In Israel, they have opportunities and they are given freedom. In Arab countries, Jews did not have that freedom. That's the difference. And of course, it's not perfect in Israel, because even in Israel, the Arabs do have some kind of resentment for the Jews. But if you ask them, would they like to move to any other Arab country, they would say, no, we are staying here, it's good here. So what will happen to Gaza? Well, it depends on the attitude of the countries around it, and if they are willing to finally treat those people like human beings and not a weapon against Israel. Thank you so much for your attention. I hope this episode was interesting for you, that you were able to learn something new. Let me know if something was new for you in my analysis of the situation. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell button. This really helps me as a creator. Also, thank you so much for everybody who's supporting the channel. You guys are great. If you want to stay up to date, make sure to follow my social channels. This is a wonderful way to stay up to date with what's ever happening in Israel. I have a Telegram channel, I have an X channel, and I share there more information that I cannot share here. So I do share some exclusive content on those platforms. So make sure to check them out and don't miss out. Also, if you would like to support my work, this would be really wonderful. I would really enjoy that and be very grateful for it. You know, if you're not gonna do it, that's okay. But it helps me as a creator. So if you think that my work is valuable, you can, you know, with a small donation even, support my work. I will be very, very thankful for that. And I also, on my Patreon page, do share some extra content. So if you want to see some behind the scenes work on my 3D models, this is also a way to be able to have access to it. So thank you so much again for watching. Have a great day. Shalom.